On Christmas Eve, a millionaire takes his daughter to see the holiday lights in the city park. A strange girl approaches and says, "She's just like me." As he stares at the child's face, the millionaire freezes, unable to believe what he's seeing. The colorful glow of Christmas lights reflected in Emma's blue eyes, forming a kaleidoscope of emotions that James Parker struggled to understand. His 5-year-old daughter, a living mirror of Sarah, stood still before the toy store window, tracing the outline of a simple doll with her tiny finger. James adjusted the cashmere scarf around his daughter's neck, his fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. The touch felt strange, almost mechanical. Emma did not react. The park buzzed with life around them. Families laughed, children chased snowflakes, couples strolled hand in hand. James and Emma were an island of silence in that sea of holiday cheer. A vendor selling roasted chestnuts passed by, the sweet, warm aroma surrounding them. For a moment, James was transported to another Christmas, 6 years earlier. The hospital corridor, white, sterile, the rhythmic sound of heart monitors echoing off the walls. Sarah, radiant even in her exhaustion, gently caressed her rounded belly. "They're dancing, James," she whispered, a smile lighting up her face. "Our little ballerinas." Dr. Blackwell entered, his expression a mask of professional neutrality. "It's time, Mrs. Parker." The following hours were a blur of anticipation and anxiety. The sound of the first cry cut through the air, followed by silence. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Parker." "It's a healthy girl." One girl singular. Dr. Blackwell's face twisted into a rehearsed expression of regret. "I'm sorry to inform you, the second baby did not survive." James's world collapsed. Sarah's cry, an unsettling mix of joy and profound pain, echoed through the room. "Daddy?" Emma's voice brought him back to the present. She was pointing to the illuminated carousel at the center of the park. James nodded mechanically, guiding her through the crowd. In the reflection of a shop window, he caught his own image. Prematurely gray hair, deep shadows under his eyes, a ghost of the man he used to be. The laughter of a nearby child made him turn his head abruptly. For a moment, he swore he saw... No. Impossible. Emma climbed onto a wooden carousel horse, her small hands gripping the golden pole. James stood beside her, watching her go round. With each turn, a flashback. Sarah cradling Emma, humming softly. Their first Christmas, with Sarah obsessively decorating the twins' room. Their last Christmas, Sarah staring at the tree with empty eyes, whispering a name James refused to hear. The carousel's cheerful music contrasted cruelly with the next memory. "Mr. Parker, this is Central Hospital calling." James felt the world stop. Sarah had gone out for a walk. She was taking too long. "There's been an accident." The following words drowned in a buzzing silence. Overdose. Accidental. The reports would say yes. In his heart, James knew otherwise. The funeral took place on a snowy day, much like this one. Emma, only 3 years old, didn't understand why Mommy was sleeping in a box. James had no answers. The carousel stopped. Emma got off, her eyes seeking approval. James forced a smile, extending his hand mechanically. She hesitated before taking it. They walked in silence, passing by Christmas choirs, street vendors, and mall Santas. The city celebrated, oblivious to the emptiness consuming them. James checked his watch. Almost time for the scheduled dinner at the Willow, followed by the gift-opening session at the mansion. Everything timed like a business transaction. Emma stopped suddenly, her eyes fixed on something beyond the decorative lights. James followed her gaze, feeling his breath catch. In the distorted reflection of a large Christmas ornament, for a moment, it looked like there were 2 Emmas. James blinked, and the illusion vanished. But Emma remained still, as if waiting for something, or someone. The bell on the large Christmas tree chimed the hour. It was the signal to go, but Emma did not move. 5 more minutes, James heard himself say, surprising even himself. Emma nodded, a small smile, the first of the night, curving her lips. As he watched his daughter walk toward the great tree, James felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope. The lights twinkled like earthly stars, creating dancing shadows on the faces of passers-by. James loosened his silk tie, sudden discomfort. The last time he felt this uneasy was when Sarah insisted on searching the hospital files, weeks before her death. The park kept its secrets under layers of light and music. Somewhere, between shadows and reflections, the past waited to be discovered. Emma continued forward, each step taking her closer to a destiny James could not yet comprehend. The snow began to fall more heavily, covering the park with a white blanket, as if the universe were wiping the slate clean, granting them all a second chance. The carousel spun in a whirlwind of colors and children's laughter. Emma hesitated at the edge, her little fingers gripping the safety bar. James watched from a distance, torn between the urge to protect her and the desire to see her smile again. A snowflake landed on Emma's nose, melting instantly. She blinked, surprised, and for a brief moment, James glimpsed the carefree child she could have been. Then it happened. A girl in a faded red coat ran by, almost knocking Emma over. Both turned simultaneously, like a mirror image. The world seemed to freeze. Identical golden hair, the same deep blue eyes, freckles in the exact same places. Even the way they frowned in confusion was identical. James felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His mind screamed it was impossible, but his eyes could not deny the truth before him. The girls stared at each other, motionless, as if afraid the other would vanish if they blinked. The festive crowd around them continued its merriment, unaware of the miracle unfolding. Emma was the first to break the silence. Her voice, usually so contained, emerged in a wondrous whisper. "She's just like me." The other girl, Charlotte, though James did not yet know her name, reached out a hesitant hand toward Emma, as if to check if she was real. Their fingers almost touched when a raspy voice cut through the air. "Charlotte, come here immediately." An elderly woman emerged from the crowd, her hurried gait contrasting with the cane she used. Dressed in simple but well-kept clothes, she froze upon seeing James. Recognition flashed in her eyes for an instant before being replaced by something close to panic. James took a step forward, thousands of questions forming in his mind. But before he could speak, the woman, Isabelle, grabbed Charlotte's arm. "Come on, dear, it's getting late." Charlotte resisted, her eyes never leaving Emma. "But Grandma, look, she's—" "I know, dear, I know." Isabelle's voice trembled slightly. "But we cannot stay, let's go." James finally found his voice. "Wait, please, I need—" But Isabelle was already leaving. Dragging a reluctant Charlotte by the hand, the crowd seemed to swallow them whole, leaving James and Emma frozen in place. Emma tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, why did she look like me? Is it Christmas magic?" James could not answer. His mind whirled faster than the carousel, trying to process the impossible. Sarah had been right. All this time, she had been right. Without thinking twice, James picked Emma up and plunged into the crowd. The scent of pine and cinnamon gave way to the smell of sweat and desperation as he squeezed between happy families, frantically searching for the faded red coat. Glimpses of Charlotte appeared and disappeared like flashes. A reflection in a tree ornament, a shadow cast by twinkling lights. James's heart pounded, drowning out even the Christmas bells. Emma clung to his neck, confused but oddly calm. "Daddy, where are we going?" We need to find that girl, sweetheart." James barely recognized his own voice. Hoarse and desperate, they turned a corner, and there they were. Isabelle was trying to hurry Charlotte into a taxi, but the girl resisted, looking back as if she knew they were being followed. "Wait!" James shouted, running the last few yards. Isabelle turned, fear evident in her eyes. For a moment, James saw beyond the facade of a worried grandmother. There was guilt there. And secrets. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Please, don't make this harder than it already is." James set Emma down, and the two girls immediately gravitated toward each other, like magnets. He knelt down, coming to Isabelle's eye level. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely contained. "And who is she, really?" Isabelle looked at the girls, then at James. Tears shone in her tired eyes. "She is Charlotte, my granddaughter." James felt the world spin. How is this possible? They told us." "I know what they told you," Isabelle interrupted, her voice now firm. "And I know why they said it. But not here, not now. These girls have been apart for too long already." As if to emphasize her point, Emma and Charlotte now stood hand in hand, examining each other with childlike fascination. They were like living mirrors, reflecting not just appearances, but movements and expressions. James looked at Isabelle, then at the girls, then back at the older woman. His businessman's mind wanted immediate answers, wanted to assign blame and understand every detail. But his father's heart— "Come with us," he said at last, "to the mansion. Spend Christmas with us. Then we'll talk." Isabelle hesitated, decades of secrets weighing on her shoulders. But then Charlotte laughed, an identical sound to Emma's, and the decision was made. "All right," she agreed, "but know this, Mr. Parker, this story has many layers, and not all of them are pretty." James nodded, feeling the weight of her words. As he helped Isabelle into the limousine he had called, he watched the girls. Emma and Charlotte were already chatting away excitedly, as if they had known each other all their lives. In a way, James thought, perhaps they had. As the vehicle glided through the decorated streets, James felt a mix of emotions he could not name. Joy at the reunion, anger at the separation, fear of what he would discover, and, surprisingly, hope. He looked at the sky through the window. The snow still fell, covering the city with a white mantle, as if the universe were wiping the slate clean, granting them all a second chance. Christmas, James realized, would bring more than gifts this year. It would bring truths long buried, and, perhaps, a new beginning for them all. The city lights passed in colorful blurs, reflecting on the identical faces of the girls. Emma and Charlotte, separated by circumstance, now united by fate. And between them, Isabelle, a reluctant guardian of secrets about to be revealed. James pressed the intercom button. "Home," he instructed the driver, and for the first time in years, the word home did not ring hollow. The Parker mansion, normally silent, now echoed with childish laughter. James watched through the slightly open door to Emma's room, as the two girls played as if they had never been separated. Charlotte held a porcelain doll with reverence, while Emma stacked colorful blocks, building an imaginary castle. Isabelle had retired to the guest room, claiming exhaustion, but James recognized the tactic. She was buying time, organizing her thoughts, perhaps even planning an escape. He would not allow it. Not this time. With heavy steps, James headed to his office, the large mahogany desk, usually covered with contracts and financial reports, now supported a dusty box. Sarah read the handwritten label. He hesitated before opening it. The scent of lavender, Sarah's favorite perfume, still lingered on the documents. James picked up the first folder, marked St. Mary's Hospital, Birth Records. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. There it was, in black and white. Emma and Charlotte Parker, born December 15th. Twin birth, but a handwritten note caught his attention. Neonatal death, Charlotte Parker, 0347. James frowned. Why would someone write the death by hand on an official document? And why had he never questioned this before? He delved deeper into the box, finding letters, receipts, and Sarah's notes. One in particular tightened his chest. I dreamed of them again. Two girls running in the garden. James says my mind is playing tricks, Mutt, but I know I feel it. Charlotte is alive somewhere. Why does no one believe me? The note was dated only a week before Sarah. James swallowed hard, pushing away the painful memory. He kept searching, finding receipts from private investigators Sarah had hired secretly. All had led to dead ends. All concluded she was delirious. But what if— A flash of memory hit him. Sarah, 7 months pregnant, stroking her belly as she spoke to the babies. Emma will be the artist, she'd said, smiling. I feel her move whenever I play the piano. And Charlotte, oh, she'll be our little adventurer. She's always restless, especially at night. James had laughed at the time, finding it adorable how Sarah attributed personalities to the unborn girls. Now, the memory made him question everything. How could he have doubted her instincts? He turned his attention back to the hospital documents. Something didn't fit. The signatures on crucial documents seemed off. Years in business had made him an expert at detecting inconsistencies. He picked up the phone and dialed his trusted private investigator. "Frank, it's James Parker. I need everything you can find about the day my daughters were born at St. Mary's Hospital, and I want a full investigation into suspicious adoptions over the last 10 years. Urgent!" Hanging up, he felt adrenaline coursing through his veins. He was close to something, he could feel it. Another flash of memory. Sarah, in her 32nd week of pregnancy, waking him in the middle of the night. "James, James, wake up." She had tears in her eyes but was smiling. "They're communicating." "What?" he had murmured, still half asleep. "The babies." One kicks and the other responds. It's like they're talking to each other. "Oh, James, it's magical." He'd held her, kissing her forehead, amazed at the connection Sarah felt with their unborn daughters. Now, watching Emma and Charlotte playing in the next room, James wondered if that connection had never truly broken, if somehow the girls had always known about each other. He returned to the documents, determined. Every paper, every note could be the key to unraveling this mystery. Hours passed. The stack of evidence grew. Patterns began to emerge, altered dates, recurring names, inexplicable sums transferred to unknown accounts. It was almost dawn when James found something that chilled his blood. A photo, hidden among medical reports. In it, a nurse he didn't recognize stood beside an elegant couple, turning the photo, an inscription, "Thank you for everything, Isabelle. You gave us the greatest gift." James felt nauseous. What role had Isabelle really played in this story? Another memory assaulted him, this time from the day of the birth. Sarah, pale and exhausted, begging to see both babies. The nurse, with a gentle voice, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker. Only Emma survived. It's better not to see the other body, to preserve good memories." At the time, James had agreed, thinking it best for Sarah. Now he realized the monumental mistake he'd made. How many other families had gone through the same? The sound of small footsteps distracted him. Emma and Charlotte stood at the office door, holding hands, looking at him curiously. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice sleepy. "Why are you crying?" James hadn't realized tears were streaming down his face. He wiped them quickly, forcing a smile. "It's nothing, sweetheart, just memories." Charlotte took a step forward, her eyes, so much like Emma's, like Sarah's, shining with a wisdom beyond her years. "Are you thinking about our mommy?" she asked softly. James felt his heart break and rebuild itself in an instant. "Yes, Charlotte." "I'm thinking about your mommy." He pulled both girls into a tight hug, feeling the weight of years of secrets and lies dissipating. In that moment, with his daughters in his arms, James made a silent promise to Sarah. "I will find out the truth, my love, for you, for them, for all the families that were torn apart. I swear." The sun began to rise, casting its first rays through the office window. A new day, a new beginning, and with it, a father's fierce determination to seek justice. James looked at the girls, then at Isabelle's photo. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture he feared but had to face. "Girls," he said softly, "how about we have breakfast together? We have a lot to talk about." Emma and Charlotte nodded, their identical smiles lighting up the room. As he guided them to the kitchen, James knew the day ahead would bring revelations that would change their lives forever. James Parker's office had turned into a maze of documents and theories. Mind maps covered the walls, red lines connecting names, dates, and events. At the center of it all, a photo of St. Mary's Hospital, its imposing white pillars now seeming to hide sinister shadows. James, with dark circles under his eyes and an unshaven face, studied hospital records intensely. Beside him, Frank typed furiously on a laptop. "What do we have in Frank?" James asked, his voice husky from sleepless nights. Frank turned the laptop screen. "Mr. Parker, I found something. Look at these birth records." James leaned forward, his eyes quickly scanning the information. Altered birth dates, inconsistent times, signatures that didn't match. It was a subtle pattern, but undeniable. "How many cases like this?" James asked, feeling a knot in his stomach. "Just one," Frank replied, his voice heavy. "Your daughter's case." James felt the weight of the revelation. It wasn't a widespread scheme, but something specific, targeted. But why? "About Charlotte's death record," Frank continued, opening another file. "There are serious discrepancies. The time of death listed doesn't match the neonatal ward's activity logs." James grabbed the document, his eyes fixed on the time, 03:47. "What does that mean, Frank?" "It means, Mr. Parker, that according to the logs, there was no baby in critical condition at that hour. In fact, there were no recorded deaths that night." James's world seemed to spin. The certainty of Charlotte's death, which for years had been an open wound, now turned into agonizing doubt. And with doubt came hope. "Frank, I need you to check something else," James said, his voice trembling slightly. "Look into adoption or baby transfers in the weeks following my daughter's birth." As Frank worked, James rose, walking to the window. Outside, Emma and Charlotte played in the garden, their laughter echoing across the property. The sight filled him with fierce determination. "Mr. Parker," Frank's voice brought him back, "I found something. 2 weeks after your daughter's birth, there was a rushed adoption, a girl with the same birth date." James felt his heart race. "The adoptive parents' names," Frank hesitated. "That's the strange part. The names were redacted. All documents related to this adoption seem to have been sanitized." James frowned. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide this adoption. But why? And how did it connect to Charlotte? He returned to his desk, rifling through documents until he found what he was looking for. The staff schedule from the night of the birth. His eyes scanned the list until he stopped at one name. Isabelle Thorne, head nurse. The same Isabelle who was now in his home caring for Charlotte. The pieces were coming together, forming an image he feared but had to confront. "Frank, I need everything on Isabelle Thorne. Work history, finances, connections, everything." While the investigator worked, James allowed himself a pause, his eyes drifting to a photo of Sarah on the desk. She smiled, radiant in her late pregnancy. A flash of memory struck. Sarah, days after the birth, insisting she'd heard 2 distinct cries that night. "James, and I know what I heard. 2 babies crying." At the time, he'd attributed it to trauma and medication. Now guilt consumed him. How could he have doubted her? "Mr. Parker," Frank's voice cut into his thoughts, "about Isabelle Thorne. She retired abruptly 2 weeks after your daughter's birth. And there's something else. She received a substantial amount of money in her account at the same time." James's blood ran cold. "How much?" $200,000. Source untraceable. The final puzzle piece fell into place. James stood abruptly, his mind racing with implications. "Frank, keep investigating. I want everything on that suspicious adoption. And find any possible link between Isabelle and those adoptive parents." Leaving his office, James paused in the hallway, watching Emma and Charlotte through the window. They were identical in every move, every expression. How could he have not seen it before? He went downstairs, determined to confront Isabelle, but when he reached the living room, it was empty. A note on the coffee table made his heart stop. "Mr. Parker, I know you're close to the truth. Please understand that my actions, as questionable as they seem, were driven by desperation and, believe it or not, love. When you're ready to hear the whole story, meet me where it all began, Isabelle." James crushed the note, anger and confusion mixing in his chest. She had fled, taking the answers he desperately sought. He returned to the garden, watching his daughters, Emma and Charlotte, separated by fate, reunited by chance. Or was it something more? "Girls," he called, his voice more steady than he felt. "Come here, we have to take a trip." Guiding them inside, James knew he was about to unearth truths long buried. St. Mary's Hospital held secrets, and it was time to face them. In the car, on the way to the hospital, James looked in the rearview mirror. Emma and Charlotte dozed in the back seat, heads together, hands clasped even in sleep. The sight strengthened his resolve. The hospital loomed ahead, imposing and threatening. James parked, his heart pounding. The answers he sought lay hidden within sterile corridors and dusty files. Carrying the sleeping girls, one in each arm, James walked toward the entrance. Each step brought him closer to the truth, redemption, and perhaps, finally, the peace Sarah had searched for. The automatic doors opened with a whisper, as if the hospital were ready to reveal its secrets. James Parker entered, carrying his daughters and the weight of 5 years of lies. It was time to learn the truth, no matter the cost. The attic of the Parker mansion was steeped in shadows, lit only by the faint glow of an old lamp. James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years and memories piled up here. Boxes stacked high-guarded fragments of a life cut short, each one a silent witness to what had been lost. His hands trembled slightly as he opened a box simply labeled Sarah. The smell of lavender, so characteristic of her, engulfed him like a ghostly embrace. On top of the pile, a brown leather-bound journal caught his eye. Sarah's diary. James hesitated for a moment, feeling as if he were about to invade his late wife's most intimate thoughts. But the need for answers outweighed any hesitation. Carefully, he opened the first page. March 12th today. I felt them both move for the first time. It's as if they're dancing inside me. Emma always first and Charlotte following right after. I already love them so much it hurts. Tears formed in James's eyes. The pure joy in those words contrasted painfully with what came after. He flipped through a few pages, reaching the days after the birth. December 18th. Something's wrong. They say Charlotte didn't survive, but I feel her. It's as if part of me knows she's alive somewhere. James thinks it's the depression talking, but what if it's not? James felt a stab of guilt. How many times had he dismissed Sarah's concerns as postpartum delusions? The following entries detailed Sarah's downward spiral, her obsessive search for answers, sleepless nights spent researching, desperate phone calls to the hospital. February 3rd. I found something today. A misplaced file in the hospital system. For a brief moment, I saw the name Charlotte Parker listed as transferred, not deceased. When I went back to check, the file was gone. Am I going crazy, or is something really wrong? James felt a chill run down his spine. Sarah had been so close to the truth and nobody believed her. The next pages were a mix of hope and despair. Sarah alternated between investigative clarity and deep depression. April 15th, I met a nurse today, Angela. She seemed nervous when I mentioned Charlotte. She said something about special projects at the hospital but refused to elaborate. I need to find out more. James made a mental note to investigate Angela. She might be a crucial lead. As he went deeper into the diary, Sarah's tone grew more frantic, more desperate. June 7th, they're watching me. I'm sure of it. Strange cars on the street, mysterious phone calls. James thinks I'm paranoid, but I know. They know. I know about Charlotte. James's heart tightened. How could he have been so blind? Sarah wasn't delusional. She was close to uncovering something dangerous. The last entries were particularly hard to read. August 20th, I've found proof, documents, photos, everything. Charlotte is alive, but it's bigger than just her. There are other children, other families, a horrible project. I need to expose this, but I'm scared. If something happens to me, I hope someone finds this diary and continues the fight. James felt nauseous. The date was just 3 days before Sarah's death. The last entry made his heart stop. August 23rd. They're coming. I know too much. James, Emma, forgive me. I love you both. Charlotte, wherever you are, Mommy loves you. Sadly, the sentence remained unfinished, the pen leaving a shaky line. James closed the diary, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Sarah hadn't taken her own life in a moment of despair. She had been silenced. Slowly, other pieces of the puzzle clicked into place in his mind. The strange behavior of the doctors after Sarah's death, the rush to have her cremated, the insistence that it was a clear case of suicide. With trembling hands, James took out his phone and dialed Frank. "Frank, I need you to investigate something for me. Sarah's death, it wasn't suicide. Find everything you can about August 23rd. Hospital records, security cameras, anything." Hanging up, James looked around the attic. How many other secrets lay hidden here? He began searching frantically through other boxes, determined to find the evidence Sarah mentioned in her last entry. After hours of searching, as the sun began to rise, James found a folder hidden at the bottom of an old trunk. Inside were photos, documents, medical records, everything Sarah had collected. With shaking hands, he spread the contents on the attic floor. There it was, in black and white. Evidence of irregularities at the hospital. Lists of families possibly affected, suspicious bank transfers. "Oh, Sarah," James murmured, tears falling freely down his face. "You found it all, and I didn't believe you." The sound of small footsteps on the attic stairs snapped him out of his thoughts. Emma and Charlotte appeared at the door, holding hands, looking curiously at the scene. "Daddy?" Emma called hesitantly. "Are you crying?" James quickly wiped his tears, forcing a smile. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just as remembering Mommy." Charlotte stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the scattered papers. "Are these Mommy's things?" James nodded, unable to lie to them. "Yes, Charlotte. Your mother. She was an incredible woman, and very, very brave." The girls approached, sitting next to James. He hugged them tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility now resting on his shoulders. "Girls," he said softly, "there's something I need to tell you. About Mommy, about what happened, and about what we're going to do now." As the sun rose, casting golden rays through the attic's small window, James began to tell the story. A story of love, loss, courage, and above all, a mother's relentless search for the truth. Sarah's words, immortalized in her diary, echoed in his mind. "If something happens to me, I hope someone finds this diary and continues the fight." James looked at his daughters, reunited after years of separation, and made a silent promise to Sarah. "I will continue your fight, my love, for you, for them, and for all the families who may have been separated. Your voice will be heard, I promise." The day was just beginning, but for James Parker, a new journey, a mission, was taking shape. A journey to honor Sarah's legacy and bring to light the truth she so bravely sought. With Sarah's diary in one hand and his daughter's hands in the other, James stood up. It was time to face the secrets of St. Mary's Hospital, to confront Isabelle, and finally uncover the whole truth about his daughter's birth. The attic, once a repository of painful memories, now became the starting point of a quest for justice. James knew the path would be difficult, but with Sarah's voice guiding him through her diary and the love of Emma and Charlotte strengthening him, he was ready to face any challenge. The truth, buried for so long, was about to come to light. And with it, the hope of healing not just for the Parker family, but for others who, like them, had their lives altered by the secrets hidden in St. Mary's Hospital's corridors. The small apartment in the city's outskirts was a world apart from the Parker mansion. Peeling walls, worn furniture, but a warmth that emanated from every corner. Charlotte sat at the kitchen table, her legs dangling without reaching the floor, watching her adoptive mother, Marie, prepare dinner. "Mommy?" Charlotte called, her voice as gentle as always. "Can I help?" Marie smiled, fatigue evident in her eyes, but love shining brighter. "Of course, my love. How about setting the cutlery on the table?" Charlotte hopped off the chair, happy to contribute. As she carefully placed forks and knives, her eyes wandered to the photo on the wall. Her, Marie, and Robert, her adoptive father, in happier days. The front door opened with a creak, and Robert entered, shoulders slumped, face etched with worry. "Any news, dear?" Marie asked, hope barely concealed in her voice. Robert shook his head, sinking into a chair. "Nothing yet. It seems no one is hiring." Charlotte approached timidly, hugging her father. "Don't worry, Daddy. I'm sure you'll find something soon." Robert forced a smile, stroking his daughter's golden hair. "Thank you, Princess. Dinner was simple: vegetable soup and bread. Charlotte noticed how her mother served smaller portions for herself, ensuring that she and Robert had enough. After dinner, while Charlotte pretended to play with her mended doll, she overheard her parents' worried whispers in the kitchen. "The rent is later, Marie. And the bills keep coming." "I know, Robert. Maybe I can pick up another shift at the hospital." "You already work too much. You barely see Charlotte." The girl hugged her doll tightly, feeling the weight of her parents' worries. Even at 5, she understood that things were not easy. Days dragged on, and the atmosphere in the small apartment grew heavier. Robert left every day searching for work, returning more discouraged each time. Marie worked double shifts at the hospital, coming home exhausted and with dark circles under her eyes. One night, Charlotte awoke to the sound of coughing. Silently leaving her room, she found Marie in the kitchen, pressing a handkerchief to her mouth. "Mommy?" she called, frightened. Marie quickly hid the blood-stained cloth. "It's nothing, sweetheart. Go back to bed." But it wasn't nothing. In the days that followed, Marie's cough worsened. Robert insisted she see a doctor, but she hesitated, worried about costs. It happened on a rainy morning. Charlotte woke to the sound of sirens. Running to the living room, she saw paramedics taking her mother on a stretcher. "Mommy!" she cried, trying to reach her. Robert held her back, tears in his eyes. "She'll be fine, a princess. She'll be fine." But she wasn't. 3 days later, Marie passed away, leaving a huge void in Charlotte's heart and a mountain of medical bills for Robert. The funeral was simple. Charlotte, wearing her best dress, now too short, held her father's hand as the coffin was lowered into the ground. The few people present offered hollow condolences and pitying looks. Life after Marie's death became a daily struggle. Robert, consumed by grief and financial despair, sought comfort in drink. Charlotte, at 6 years old, found herself taking on responsibilities far beyond her age. She learned to make simple sandwiches for dinner, wash her own clothes, even though she could barely reach the sink, and console her father on nights he cried. Clutching Marie's photo, the bills piled up. The apartment, once cozy, now felt cold and empty. Charlotte heard Robert's heated arguments with the landlord, the threats of eviction. One night, while pretending to sleep, she heard Robert on the phone. "Please, just 1 more week. I promise I'll get the money. We can't end up on the street. I have a little girl." Charlotte hugged her doll tighter, silent tears streaming down her face. She desperately wished her mother were there to make everything right again. Days dragged on. Robert occasionally found odd jobs, but the money was never enough. Charlotte began skipping meals, claiming she wasn't hungry so her father could eat more. It was on a particularly hard afternoon that a neighbor, Mrs. Isabelle, knocked on the door. Charlotte opened it, finding the elderly woman holding a covered dish. "Hello, dear," Isabelle smiled kindly. "I thought you and your dad might enjoy some stew." The delicious smell made Charlotte's stomach growl. "Thank you, Mrs. Isabelle," she said, trying to be polite as her mother had taught. Isabelle looked past the girl, seeing the state of the apartment. Concern filled her eyes. "Where is your father, Charlotte?" The girl hesitated. He went out looking for work." Isabelle nodded, understanding more than Charlotte realized. "Well, how about you come with me for a while? We can eat together, and maybe you can help me organize some things." Charlotte looked back at the empty, sad apartment, then at Isabelle's kind face. Slowly, she nodded. In the weeks that followed, Isabelle became a constant presence in Charlotte's life. She brought meals, helped with chores, and most importantly, offered a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. Robert, lost in his own grief and shame, barely noticed the changes. He spent more and more time out, looking for work, returning late at night smelling of cheap alcohol. On a particularly cold night, everything came to a head. Charlotte woke to the sound of breaking glass. Running to the living room, she found Robert on the floor, a broken bottle beside him. "Daddy!" she cried, rushing to him. Robert looked up at her, eyes filled with drink and tears. "I'm sorry, Charlotte. I'm so sorry I failed you and your mother." Charlotte hugged him, smelling alcohol and despair. "It's okay, Daddy. It will be okay." But she knew it wasn't, and it wouldn't be. The next morning, while Robert still slept, Charlotte packed her school backpack with a few clothes and her precious doll. Tears in her eyes, she left a simple note. "Daddy, I love you, but you need to take care of yourself. I'll be fine, I promise." With one last look at the apartment that was once a happy home, Charlotte left, closing the door softly behind her. She knew exactly where to go. Knocking on Isabelle's door, Charlotte found the elderly woman already awake, as if waiting for her. "I was wondering when you'd come, dear," Isabelle said softly, opening her arms. Charlotte ran into the embrace, finally allowing the tears to flow freely. As Isabelle comforted her, the girl felt for the first time in a long while that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. What Charlotte didn't know was that this was only the beginning of a journey that would lead her back to her true origins, to a sister she never knew existed, and to a father who had never stopped searching for her. The late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains of the Parker Mansion's living room, creating dancing patterns on the rug where Emma and Charlotte played. The two girls, identical in appearance but with such different histories, were absorbed in a puzzle game. "Look, Charlotte," Emma exclaimed, fitting in a piece. "I found the cat's nose," Charlotte laughed, the sound echoing Emma's so perfectly that it was impossible to tell them apart. "Great. Now we just need the tail," James observed from the door, a cup of coffee forgotten in his hand. Each synchronized movement, each shared laugh, each knowing look between the girls was living proof of their bond. A bond that went beyond mere physical resemblance. "They look like they were born to be together, don't they?" Isabelle's voice surprised him. The older woman stood by his side, her eyes on the girls, a mix of love and apprehension in her gaze. James nodded slowly. "It's as if they're making up for lost time." The girls were now humming a lullaby, their voices blending in perfect harmony. James frowned. "Isabelle, how does Charlotte know that song? Sarah used to sing it to Emma every night." Isabelle paled slightly. "Oh, it must be a coincidence. It must be a... You know how popular lullabies can be." But James noticed the tremor in her voice, the way her eyes avoided his. Something wasn't right. Outside, later that day, the similarities between Emma and Charlotte became even more evident. They ran, jumped, and played as if they'd spent their whole lives together, anticipating each other's moves with uncanny precision. "Grandma Isabelle," Charlotte called, running toward the older woman. "Look what Emma taught me." The two girls performed a series of dance steps, perfectly synchronized. Isabelle applauded, but James noticed the slight tremor in her hands. "Amazing how well they get along, isn't it, Isabelle?" James commented, his voice casual but his eyes alert. Isabelle forced a smile. "Yes, they're very alike." "Almost as if they were sisters," James pressed, watching Isabelle's reaction closely. Isabelle's smile faltered for a moment. "Well, children have a way of bonding quickly, don't they?" James decided to change tactics. "You know, Isabelle, I've been doing some research at St. Mary's Hospital. I've found some inconsistencies in the records from the night the girls were born." Isabelle's face lost all color. "Oh, what kind of inconsistencies?" "Altered records, times that don't match." James paused, his eyes fixed on Isabelle, a head nurse who retired abruptly right after the girl's birth. Isabelle took a step back as if struck. "Mr. Parker, I don't know what you're implying, but..." "I'm not implying anything, Isabelle," James interrupted, his voice firm. "I'm seeking the truth, for Emma, for Charlotte, and for Sarah." The mention of Sarah's name hit Isabelle like a physical blow. She steadied herself on a nearby chair, her breathing quick. "James," she began, her voice trembling, "there are things you don't understand, things that..." But before she could finish, the sound of shattering glass echoed through the house, followed by the frightened cries of the girls. James and Isabelle ran inside, finding Emma and Charlotte standing in the middle of the living room, shards of glass all around them. A picture frame had fallen, Sarah's smiling face amidst the fragments. "Sorry, Daddy," Emma whimpered. "We didn't mean to knock it over." But James barely heard her. His eyes were on Charlotte, who had bent down to pick up the photo. The girl looked at Sarah's image with an expression of recognition and confusion. I dreamed about her," Charlotte whispered, her fingers tracing Sarah's face in the photo. "She was singing to me." The silence that followed was deafening. James looked at Isabelle, who seemed ready to faint. "Charlotte," James knelt beside the girl, his heart pounding. "Have you seen this woman before?" Charlotte frowned, concentrating. "No, but I feel like I know her." "It's strange, isn't it?" James felt a wave of emotions wash over him. Anger, confusion, hope, fear. He stood up, facing Isabelle. "I think it's time we had a serious conversation, Isabelle," he said, his voice low and controlled. "No more secrets, no more half-truths." Isabelle seemed to wage an internal battle. Her eyes flicked from James to the girls, as if calculating risks. "Very well," she finally said, her voice defeated. "But not here, not in front of them." James nodded. "Emma, Charlotte, why don't you two go play in the garden for a while?" The girls obeyed, casting curious glances at the adults as they left. Once alone, the tension in the room became palpable. James indicated the sofa to Isabelle, who sat as if carrying the weight of the world. "Start at the beginning," James said, sitting across from her, "and don't leave anything out." Isabelle took a deep breath, tears forming in her eyes. "James, you must understand what I did out of love. Desperate, misguided love, but love all the same." James felt his heart tighten. Whatever the truth, he knew it would change everything. 5 years ago, Isabelle began, her voice trembling, "I was head nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. That's where I met Sarah, and where I made the biggest mistake of my life." As Isabelle spoke, James felt the world he knew crumble around him. Each word was a revelation, each confession another puzzle piece finally falling into place. Outside, Emma and Charlotte played, unaware of the storm gathering inside the house. Their laughter, so similar, echoed through the garden, a constant reminder of the unbreakable bond that united them. The truth, buried for so long, was finally emerging, and with it, the promise of changes that would affect not only the Parker family, but everyone around them. James Parker's office, once a sanctuary of business and contracts, had become a command center worthy of a spy movie. Whiteboards covered the walls, filled with names, dates, and connections scribbled in red. At the center of it all, a photo of St. Mary's Hospital, its imposing white pillars now seeming to hide sinister secrets. James, with deep circles under his eyes and an unkempt beard, studied a stack of hospital records. At his side, Frank typed furiously on a laptop. "What do we have, Frank?" James asked, his voice rough with fatigue. Frank turned the screen. "Mr. Parker, I managed to access the hospital's internal records. It's disturbing." James leaned closer, eyes scanning the information. Altered birth dates, forged medical records, even fake death certificates. But what drew his attention most were the glaring inconsistencies in Emma and Charlotte's records. "Look at this," Frank pointed to a specific entry. Emma's birth time was recorded at 11:45 p.m., but Charlotte's, it was erased and rewritten several times, as if someone couldn't decide whether she should exist or not. James felt a knot in his stomach. "And what about Charlotte's death record?" Frank opened another file. "Here's where it gets interesting. The death certificate was signed by Dr. Blackwell at 03:47. But according to system logs, Dr. Blackwell wasn't at the hospital at that time. Then who signed it?" James asked, feeling adrenaline rush through his veins. "That's the point," Frank answered quietly. "The digital signature was made using a nurse's credentials, Isabelle Thorne's." James felt as if he'd been punched. Isabelle, the woman caring for Charlotte, was at the center of it all. "Frank, I need you to do something," James said, his voice trembling slightly. "Find all the people who worked in the maternity ward that night. Nurses, doctors, even janitors. I want to speak to all of them." In the days that followed, James embarked on a frenetic search for answers. He interviewed dozens of former hospital employees, each conversation revealing more questions than answers. One nurse, Angela Winters, seemed particularly nervous during her interview. "Mr. Parker," she said, her hands shaking as she held a coffee cup. "There are things that happened in that hospital, things that should never have happened." "What kind of things, Miss Winters?" James pressed gently. Angela looked around as if afraid of being overheard. Babies being moved in the middle of the night, records altered, wealthy families suddenly showing up, leaving with newborns, but we were told not to ask questions. James's heart raced. And on the night my daughters were born, Angela closed her eyes, trying to remember. It was chaotic. I remember hearing 2 distinct cries from the delivery room, but afterward there was only one baby in the nursery. And the other? James could barely breathe. I saw Isabelle carrying a baby out of the maternity ward. She said it was an emergency transfer, but James thanked Angela and dismissed her, his mind whirling with the new information. Every puzzle piece he found led back to Isabelle. Back in his office, James and Frank continued to unravel the mystery. They discovered suspicious bank transfers to offshore accounts, all somehow connected to the hospital. "Mr. Parker," Frank called, his voice tense. "I found something. An old email, partially deleted, but I recovered part of it." James leaned in to read. "The twins project is progressing as planned. Subjects E, P, and CP were successfully separated. The adoptive family was... the rest was corrupted." "Twins project?" James murmured, feeling a chill down his spine. What on earth is going on at that hospital? As the investigation advanced, it became increasingly clear that Emma and Charlotte's case was not isolated. There were hints of other separations, other dead babies who were actually given to adoptive families. But why? What was the purpose behind all this? James spent sleepless nights connecting dots, following leads. Each new discovery brought him closer to the truth, but also frightened him with its implications. One night, reviewing the hospital documents for the 100th time, James noticed something he'd missed. A small handwritten note in the corner of Emma's record. "Confirm with IT before proceeding. IT Isabelle Thorne." James felt a surge of rage and betrayal. Isabelle was not just a piece in this puzzle, she was one of its architects. With trembling hands, he picked up the phone and dialed Frank. "Frank, I need you to do one more thing for me," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Find everything you can about Isabelle Thorne, her past, her connections, everything. And prepare a warrant to search her apartment." Hanging up, James looked at Sarah's photo on his desk. "I'm close, my love," he murmured. "I'll find the truth. For you, for our daughters, for all the families who were separated." The sun began to rise, casting the first rays through the office window. A new day, and with it, the promise of long-awaited answers. James stood determined. It was time to confront Isabelle and expose the truth, no matter the cost. For Emma, for Charlotte, and for Sarah's memory, he would see this through. The investigation had reached a critical point. The puzzle pieces were almost all in place. Only the final confrontation remained, the confirmation James feared but knew was necessary. With one last look at the information-covered boards in his office, James left, ready to confront Isabelle and finally unravel the mystery that had destroyed so many lives. St. Mary's Hospital rose imposingly against the overcast sky. Its white walls concealing secrets James was determined to uncover. With firm steps and a racing heart, he passed through the glass doors, heading straight to reception. "James Parker, I have a meeting with Dr. Grantham," he announced, his voice carrying an authority that made the receptionist flinch slightly. Minutes later, James sat before Dr. Theodore Grantham, the hospital director. The middle-aged man seemed perfectly composed, but James noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he offered him a cup of coffee. "Mr. Parker, what brings you here?" Grantham asked, his tone falsely cordial. James went straight to the point. "I'm here to talk about the night of December 15th, 5 years ago. The night my daughters were born." Grantham's smile faltered for a moment. "Ah, yes, a tragic night. If I recall, I'm deeply sorry for your loss." "What loss would that be, Dr. Grantham?" James pressed, leaning forward. "Because, you see, I have reason to believe both my daughters are alive." The silence that followed was deafening. Grantham adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Parker, I don't know what led you to think that, but I assure you the records are clear. Only one of your daughters survived. James placed a folder full of documents on the table. Records can be altered, Doctor, and yours were, repeatedly. The next 2 hours were a battle of words and evidence. James presented the inconsistencies he had discovered, the witnesses he had interviewed. With each revelation, Grantham seemed to shrink a bit more in his chair. "What happened that night, Doctor?" James demanded, his patience running out. "I want the truth." Grantham sighed deeply, seeming to age years in seconds. "Mr. Parker, what happened is more complex than you can imagine. Decisions were made, decisions that, at the time, seemed for the greater good." "Greater good," James nearly shouted. "Separating newborn twins is for the greater good." "It wasn't just about your daughters," Grantham admitted reluctantly. "There was a study in progress, a study on nature versus nurture. Identical twins raised in drastically different environments." James felt nauseated. "You played with lives as if they were lab rats?" Grantham did not reply, his silence more revealing than any words. "Who else was involved?" James pressed. I can't name names," Grantham stammered. "But I can tell you that the head nurse that night, Isabelle Thorne, knows more than she lets on." James left the hospital with more questions than answers, but certain he was on the right track. Isabelle was the key to solving the entire mystery. Meanwhile, at the Parker mansion, Emma and Charlotte played in the garden under Isabelle's watchful eye. The girls were building a sandcastle, their hands moving in perfect sync. "You know, Charlotte," Emma said casually, "it's funny how we both like the same things." Charlotte nodded, smiling. "Yes, and how we make the same faces when we're thinking." The two laughed, their identical laughter echoing. Isabelle, sitting not far away, felt her heart tighten. "Grandma Isabelle," Charlotte called, "look what Emma taught me." The girls performed a dance routine. Isabelle applauded, but couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to collapse. "It's incredible how well they get along, isn't it?" Emma commented, looking at Isabelle. Charlotte nodded slowly. "It's not just how we look alike, it's everything. Our tastes, our gestures." She paused, looking directly at Emma. "Sometimes I feel like you're part of me." Emma agreed. "I feel that too, Charlotte, like we're sisters." The two girls exchanged a silent look of understanding. Isabelle, watching, felt the weight of years of secrets pressed down on her shoulders. "Girls," Isabelle called, her voice trembling, "how about we go inside for a snack?" Guiding them inside, Isabelle couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to crumble. Her hands shook as she served sandwiches, nearly dropping the pitcher of juice. "Grandma, are you okay?" Charlotte asked, concerned. "I'm fine, dear," Isabelle forced a smile. "Just a bit tired." But it wasn't fatigue. It was guilt, pure and crushing. Looking at Emma and Charlotte, so innocent and happy together, Isabelle felt the weight of her actions more than ever. The sound of the front door opening made Isabelle freeze. James entered the kitchen, his eyes immediately locking onto hers. "Isabelle," he said, his voice controlled but charged with emotion, "we need to talk." The girls looked from James to Isabelle, sensing the tension in the air. Isabelle nodded slowly, knowing the moment she feared had finally arrived. "Emma? Charlotte?" James turned to the girls. "Why don't you go play in your room for a while? Isabelle and I need to discuss some adult matters." The girls obeyed reluctantly, casting curious glances over their shoulders as they climbed the stairs. Once alone, James faced Isabelle, his eyes full of determination. "No more lies, Isabelle," he said firmly. "I want the whole truth. Now." Isabelle sank into a chair, looking decades older. Tears began to form in her eyes. "James," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "what I did, what we all did, started with the best of intentions, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions, isn't it?" The silence in the Parker mansion's living room was heavy, almost tangible. James sat rigidly in his armchair, his knuckles white from gripping the armrests. Isabelle, before him, looked frail and fearful, tears trembling in her eyes. "Isabelle," James began, his voice controlled but filled with emotion, "I spent the last few days digging up lies and half-truths. Now, I want to hear it all from you. No omissions, no excuses. Isabelle closed her eyes as if gathering courage. When she opened them again, they were full of unshed tears. James, what happened that night? It wasn't an accident or a medical error. It was a decision, a terrible decision, made by people who thought they were doing the right thing. James felt his stomach turn. What kind of people separate newborn twins, Isabelle? What kind of right thing is that? Before Isabelle could respond, footsteps on the stairs interrupted them. Emma and Charlotte appeared at the living room door, their expressions a mix of curiosity and worry. "Daddy?" Emma asked hesitantly. "Is everything okay?" James forced a smile, trying to mask the tension. "Yes, sweetheart. Isabelle and I are just having an adult conversation." Charlotte took a step forward, her blue eyes, so much like Emma's, fixed on Isabelle. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Isabelle quickly wiped her tears, but the damage was done. The girls exchanged looks, silent communication passing between them. "Girls," James said gently, "why don't you go play in the garden for a bit? I promise we'll explain everything later." Reluctantly, Emma and Charlotte left, but not without casting curious glances behind them. Once the door closed, James turned back to Isabelle, his patience running out. "Now, Isabelle, the truth, all of it." Isabelle took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging under the weight of secrets. "It all started with a study. Our study about nature versus nurture. The idea was to separate identical twins at birth and observe their development in drastically different environments." James felt a wave of nausea. "You treated them like lab rats." "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Isabelle protested weakly. "It was meant to be a controlled, ethical study. But then, things got out of hand." As Isabelle spoke, James felt his world collapse. She described how wealthy families desperate for children were approached, how babies were exchanged, records altered, lives manipulated. "And Sarah?" James asked, his voice shaking. "She found out something, didn't she?" Isabelle nodded sadly. "Sarah was brilliant, James. She started putting the pieces together, asking questions. She was so close to uncovering it all." James felt his heart clench. "Is that why she—" "No," Isabelle exclaimed, horrified. "We never—" "James, Sarah's death was a terrible accident, but she was under so much pressure, so distressed." Outside the room, in the hallway, Emma and Charlotte crouched, listening to every word through the slightly open door. Their eyes met, filled with confusion and fear. "Emma," Charlotte whispered, Do you think we—" Emma squeezed Charlotte's hand. "I always felt like something was missing. And when I met you, it was like that missing part was found," Charlotte finished. Back in the living room, Isabelle's confession continued, each word a painful revelation. "I was just a nurse, James, but I knew. I took part. And when I saw Charlotte, so small, so vulnerable, I couldn't bear the idea of giving her to strangers." James stared at her, incredulous. "So you took her for yourself, raised her as your granddaughter?" Isabelle nodded, tears streaming down her face. I thought I was saving her, giving her a chance at a normal life." "Normal?" James nearly shouted. "You separated her from her sister, from her family." Outside in the hallway, Emma and Charlotte hugged, finally understanding the truth their hearts already knew. "We're sisters," Emma whispered. "Twins," Charlotte nodded, tears in her eyes. "We always have been." Inside, James stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the garden. How long had they been talking? Minutes? Hours? "What happens now, Isabelle?" he asked, his voice tired. Isabelle rose shakily. "James, I'm ready to face the consequences of my actions. But please, think of the girls. They've been through so much already." Before James could respond, the door opened fully. Emma and Charlotte entered, hand in hand, their faces a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice surprisingly firm. "We heard everything." James felt his heart break. He wanted to protect them, spare them this painful truth. But looking at them now, so united, so strong together. He realized that perhaps they were more resilient than he thought. "Charlotte is my sister, isn't she?" Emma continued. "My twin." James nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart, she is." Charlotte looked at Isabelle, her eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "Grandma, why?" Isabelle fell to her knees, sobbing. "Oh, Charlotte, my dear, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." The girls approached Isabelle, each placing a hand on her shoulder. The gesture, so full of compassion, made James's heart tighten. "What do we do now, Daddy?" Emma asked, looking at James with a maturity beyond her years. James looked at his daughters, at Isabelle, at Sarah's portrait on the wall. So many lives affected, so many secrets revealed. And yet, there was more to discover, more people involved in this terrible scheme. "Now," he said softly, "we start to fix what was broken, together." As the last ray of sunlight disappeared over the horizon, the Parker family, now complete though wounded, shared a hesitant but hopeful embrace. The road ahead would be hard, filled with challenges and painful revelations, but for the first time in years, there was hope. The truth, as painful as it was, had finally come to light, and with it, the promise of healing, redemption, and a new beginning for them all. The silence in the Parker mansion's living room was almost deafening. James, Emma, and Charlotte sat on the sofa, their hands intertwined, while Isabelle occupied the armchair opposite, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. "Isabelle," James began, his voice low but firm, "it's time. No more half-truths, no more secrets. We want to know everything." Isabelle nodded slowly, tears already forming in her tired eyes. She took a deep breath, as if preparing to dive into deep, turbulent waters. "It all started 20 years ago," she began, her voice trembling. "I was a young nurse at St. Mary's, full of dreams and ambitions." As Isabelle spoke, memories flooded her mind, carrying her back to that time. Flashback. The hospital corridor was quiet, fluorescent lights humming softly. Isabelle, in her spotless white uniform, walked briskly, medical bills hidden in her purse. "Miss Thorne?" a deep voice called. It was Dr. Grantham, the hospital director. "A moment, please." Isabelle felt her heart race. She followed him to his office, fearing the worst. "Isabelle," he said, sitting behind his imposing desk, "it has come to my attention that you're in financial trouble." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her debts. "Dr. Grantham, I can explain." He raised a hand, silencing her. "No need. In fact, I have a proposal for you. Proposal for one that could solve all your financial problems. And more." End of flashback. "That's how it all began," Isabelle said, returning to the present. "Dr. Grantham offered me a large sum of money to participate in a special study. At the time, it seemed like a solution to all my problems." James frowned. "What kind of study?" Isabelle closed her eyes, as if the memory was too painful to face. It was a study on nature versus nurture, separating identical twins at birth and observing their development in drastically different settings. Emma and Charlotte gasped in unison, gripping each other's hands tighter. "How could you?" James asked, his voice filled with anger and disbelief. "At first, we convinced ourselves it was for the greater good," Isabelle continued, her voice barely a whisper. "We believed the results could revolutionize our understanding of human development." She paused, tears rolling down her cheeks. "But then you girls were born." Flashback. The delivery room was chaotic. Sarah Parker screamed in pain as she gave birth to her daughters. Isabelle was there, her heart torn between professional duty and the terrible secret she carried. The first cry pierced the air, followed by another. Two perfect, identical girls. "They're beautiful," Sarah sighed, exhausted but radiant. Isabelle felt her heart clench. She knew what had to be done. But at that moment, looking at those two innocent lives, the entire logic of the study crumbled. End of flashback. "I couldn't bear the idea of separating them," Isabelle continued, her voice choked with emotion. "But Dr. Grantham insisted. He said it was too late to back out." James stood abruptly, walking to the window. His mind reeled with these revelations. "So you decided to keep Charlotte?" Isabelle nodded sadly. I thought I could protect her, give her a good life, away from all this. Charlotte, who had remained silent, finally spoke. But what about our mother? Did she know? Isabelle's expression twisted into a mask of pain. Sarah, she began to suspect. She was brilliant, you know. She started putting together the pieces, doing research. James turned sharply. That's why she... No, Isabelle exclaimed, horrified. We never... James, Sarah's death was a horrible accident. But she was so close to the truth. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken emotions and shocking revelations. Emma, who had been quiet, absorbing everything, finally spoke. So, all this time, I had a sister and didn't know. You were always sisters, James added softly, sitting beside the girls again. Twins separated by a terrible conspiracy. Isabelle sobbed openly now. I'm so sorry. If I could go back. But you can't, James said firmly. What's done is done. The question now is, what do we do moving forward? The girls looked at each other, silently communicating. Then, to everyone's surprise, Charlotte stood and walked to Isabelle. Grandma, she said softly, what you did was wrong, very wrong, but you took care of me. You loved me. Isabelle stared at Charlotte, eyes wide, scarcely believing what she heard. Emma joined her sister. It won't be easy, but maybe we can try to understand, try to forgive. James watched the scene, feeling a mixture of pride and pain. His daughters, separated for so long, now united in compassion. Isabelle, he said, his voice calmer now. What you did is unforgivable, but because of these girls, because of the love Sarah had for them, we're willing to listen, to try to understand. Isabelle nodded, tears flowing freely. I'll tell you everything, every detail, every name. I'll do whatever it takes to fix what I can. As the sun set outside, casting long shadows across the room, the Parker family, now complete though wounded, formed a hesitant, hopeful embrace. The truth, as painful as it was, had finally emerged. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with legal and emotional challenges. But for the first time in years, there was a light at the end of the tunnel, a chance to rebuild what was broken and perhaps create something even stronger. The next morning dawned grey and cold, reflecting the emotional climate inside the Parker mansion. James hadn't slept, spending the night in his office, surrounded by photos of Sarah and hospital documents. His eyes were red and swollen, a mix of exhaustion and suppressed tears. In Emma's room, the twins slept curled up together, as if afraid of being separated again. Isabelle sat stiffly in the living room, seeming not to have moved at all. When everyone finally gathered for breakfast, silence reigned. James stared at his untouched coffee cup, his thoughts a storm of conflicting emotions. Dad, Emma's soft voice brought him back to reality. Are you okay? James forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm processing, sweetheart. Charlotte, seated beside Emma, hesitated before speaking. What? What happens now? The question hung in the air, heavy and urgent. James finally raised his eyes, meeting Isabelle's gaze. That depends, he said, his voice controlled but emotional. Isabelle, you said you'd tell us everything. We're ready to hear it. Isabelle nodded slowly, placing her trembling cup on the table. Where should I start? From the beginning, James replied firmly. I want every detail, every person involved. As Isabelle spoke, detailing the elaborate scheme of separated twins, James felt his anger grow. Doctors, nurses, even administrative staff, all had played roles in the conspiracy. What about Sarah? James asked, his voice breaking slightly. Did she suspect something? Isabelle closed her eyes, pain evident on her face. Sarah was brilliant. James. She started piecing it together, asking questions. In the last months before the accident, she was so close to the truth. James felt a wave of nausea. So her death. It was a terrible accident, Isabelle insisted, tears in her eyes. But the pressure, the anguish she felt, it didn't help. The twins listened in silence, their hands linked under the table. Emma spoke first. "So all this time, I had a sister and didn't know." Charlotte nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "And I always felt something missing, like a part of me was somewhere else." James observed his daughters, feeling a mix of overwhelming love and deep sadness. They had been robbed of 5 years together, of shared memories, of a bond that should have been unbreakable from birth. "Isabelle," he said, turning to the older woman, who now looked so small and frail, "I understand you cared for Charlotte, that you loved her, but how could you live with this secret for so long?" Isabelle sobbed openly. "At first, I convinced myself I was protecting Charlotte, giving her a better life. But as the years passed, the guilt became unbearable." James fought the urge to shout, to demand immediate justice, but looking at his daughters, seeing the compassion in their eyes, he forced himself to breathe deeply. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice softer. "How do we move forward?" Emma and Charlotte looked at each other, silently communicating again. "We want to stay together," Emma said firmly. "We never want to be separated again," Charlotte nodded vigorously. "We've already lost so much time." James felt his heart tighten. "Of course you'll stay together. I'll never let anyone separate you again." Isabelle raised her eyes, hesitant. "And what about me? Jesus, I understand if you want me to leave, to never see me again." Surprising everyone, Charlotte replied, "Grandma, what you did was terrible. But you cared for me, loved me. I can't just erase that." Emma agreed. "It will take time, a lot of time, to process this, to forgive. But maybe we can try." James looked at his daughters with a mix of pride and admiration. Their capacity for compassion, even in the face of such betrayal, was inspiring. "Isabelle," he said at last, "what you did is unforgivable, but for the sake of these girls, for Sarah's love, we're willing to try to understand, to try to forgive. But it will be a long, difficult process." Isabelle nodded, tears streaming freely. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll testify against everyone involved, help in any investigation, anything to try and fix what I've done." James stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the sky was starting to clear, the clouds slowly dissipating. It was as if nature mirrored the changing atmosphere inside the house. "We'll take it step by step," he said, turning back to his newly reunited family. "First, we need to sort out Charlotte's legal status. She's a Parker, and that needs to be official." The twins smiled at each other, the idea of being officially recognized as sisters bringing a spark to their eyes. "Then," James continued, "we deal with the hospital, with everyone involved in this terrible scheme. They must be held accountable." Isabelle nodded gravely. "I'll help in any way I can. It's the least I can do." James looked at each face in the room. His daughters, so alike yet so unique. Isabelle, carrying the weight of years of guilt, and Sarah's portrait on the wall, smiling as if approving the path they were taking. "It won't be easy," he said softly. "There will be hard days ahead, but we'll face them together." As a family, Emma and Charlotte stood, wrapping their arms around their father in a tight embrace. Isabelle watched from a distance, regret and hope mingling in her eyes. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. There would be moments of anger, pain, and doubt, but there would also be moments of joy, discovery, and renewed love. The truth, as painful as it was, had finally emerged, and with it, the promise of a new beginning, a chance to rebuild what had been broken, and maybe create something even stronger from the fragments. As the Parker family embraced, reunited after years of separation and secrets, the sun finally broke through the clouds, casting a golden ray of light through the window. It was a new day, a new chapter, and together they were ready to face it. In the Parker mansion's living room, once the stage of so many painful revelations, Christmas decorations now adorned the space. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air, mingling with the palpable anticipation. James Parker stood by the fireplace, watching the dancing flames while waiting for the last guests to arrive. Emma and Charlotte, dressed in identical outfits, whispered excitedly on the sofa, their hands intertwined as if afraid to part again. The doorbell rang. Isabelle, who had been nervously adjusting the tree's ornaments, froze. James gave her a reassuring look before going to answer the door. "Robert," James greeted, extending his hand to Charlotte's adoptive father. "Welcome. Please, come in." Robert, still visibly shaken by recent revelations, entered hesitantly. His eyes immediately found Charlotte, who ran to hug him. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, burying her face in his chest. Robert held her tightly, tears in his eyes. "My little girl." Emma watched, curious and apprehensive. James placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It's okay, sweetheart," he murmured. "He's your family too now." When everyone was settled, James cleared his throat to get their attention. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice charged with emotion. "I know the last few weeks have been challenging, to say the least, but we're here today to discuss the future, Emma and Charlotte's future." The girls straightened up, their faces a mixture of anxiety and hope. "After much thought and discussion," James continued, exchanging glances with Robert and Isabelle, "we've reached a decision. One we believe is best for the girls." Robert leaned forward, his voice rough. "And what decision is that?" James took a deep breath. "We will share custody. Emma and Charlotte will live mainly here, at the mansion, but will spend regular time with you, Robert. And Isabelle," he turned to the older woman, "you will continue to be part of their lives if you wish." Isabelle let out a sob of relief. "Thank you, James. Thank you." Charlotte looked at Robert, worry in her eyes. "Daddy, do you agree with this?" Robert gave a sad smile. "My dear, all I want is your happiness. And I know your happiness is with your sister." Emma, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. Can we really stay together? Forever?" James knelt before the girls, holding their hands. "Yes, my darlings. You will never be separated again, I promise." The twins hugged each other, tears of joy streaming down their faces. The scene moved everyone, reminding them of the true meaning of family. "Now," James said, standing up, "how about we celebrate this new beginning? After all, it's Christmas." The hours that followed were filled with joy and reconciliation. The mansion echoed with laughter and lively conversation. Emma and Charlotte ran around, showing each other their favorite toys and making plans for the future. When it was time to exchange gifts, James asked for silence. "Emma, Charlotte," he said, handing each a small box. "These are special gifts, something to symbolize your connection." The girls opened the boxes simultaneously, revealing two identical heart-shaped pendants. When put together, they formed a single, complete heart. "Oh, Daddy!" Emma exclaimed, tears in her eyes. "It's beautiful," Charlotte whispered, admiring the pendant. James helped them put on their necklaces, the cool metal against their skin, a tangible reminder of their unbreakable bond. Isabelle approached timidly, holding two packages. I also have something for you." Inside the packages, the girls found photo albums. Emma's album was full of photos of Charlotte growing up, while Charlotte's contained photos of Emma. "So you can know the years you lost," Isabelle explained softly. The twins hugged Isabelle, murmuring heartfelt thanks. James watched and feeling a complex mix of emotions. The road to forgiveness would be long, but this was a good start. When everyone gathered around the tree, James cleared his throat again. "I'd like to say a few words," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "This year taught us so much about family, forgiveness, and new beginnings. We've learned that the bonds that unite us are stronger than any secret or separation." He looked at Emma and Charlotte, his heart overflowing with love. "My dear daughters, you are living proof that love overcomes all adversity. Your ability to forgive, to love unconditionally, inspires us all." Turning to Robert and Isabelle, he continued, "And to you, thank you. Thank you for caring for Charlotte, for loving her as your own. Our family may not be conventional, but it's ours, and together we'll give our girls all the love and support they deserve." Silent tears ran down everyone's cheeks. Isabelle stepped forward, her voice quavering with emotion. I want to express my deepest gratitude," she began, "for your forgiveness, for the chance to be part of this family. I promise to dedicate every remaining day of my life to making amends, to supporting these wonderful girls. Emma and Charlotte stood, pulling everyone into a group hug. For a moment, all past hurts and resentments faded, replaced by a sense of unity and hope. Later, while the adults talked in the living room, Emma and Charlotte slipped away to the garden. Snow fell gently, transforming the world into a fairy tale scene. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Charlotte asked, her breath forming tiny clouds in the cold air. Emma smiled, squeezing her sister's hand. "I don't know for sure, but I know we'll face it together. Always." Inside the house, James watched his daughters playing in the snow. Isabelle and Robert joined him at the window, each lost in their own thoughts. "They're incredible, aren't they?" Robert murmured. James nodded. "They are, and they deserve the best we can give them." Isabelle wiped a tear. "We'll make it work." For them, as they watched the twins build a snowman, laughing and playing as if they had never been separated, everyone felt a surge of hope. The path ahead would not be easy, but with love, understanding, and commitment, they would face each challenge together. The snow continued to fall, covering the garden with a pure white blanket. It was as if the universe were offering them all a new blank page, a chance to rewrite their story. Emma and Charlotte, hand in hand, looked to the window, waving happily to their reunited family. Their identical smiles, filled with love and promise, were living testimony that even in the darkest moments, the light of love and truth always finds a way. And so, under the winter sky, the Parker family, expanded, wounded but healed, welcomed a new chapter in their lives. A chapter of unity, forgiveness, and above all, unconditional love. The future, once uncertain and grim, now gleamed with possibilities. Emma and Charlotte would grow up together, supported by a network of love that transcended blood ties and conventions. And together, they would learn that true family is the one we choose to build, nurture, and love, no matter what life throws their way. As the night sky sparkled with distant stars, the laughter of the reunited family echoed softly through the mansion's halls. The promise of a new beginning sealed by hope and love would guide them forward. And in the quiet hush of the falling snow, their story began anew,